Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone thinks is powerless. Riley Morrison learned that truth the hard way. Sitting in her father's empty office at 3 o'clock in the morning, surrounded by case files that would soon make her the most hated teenager in Lincoln, Ohio. The manila folders were yellowed with age, their edges soft from years of handling. Each one represented a piece of her father's legacy. District Attorney David Morrison, the man who'd built his career on a simple philosophy: follow the money, find the crime. "Every criminal leaves a paper trail, sweetheart," he told her countless times. "They can't help themselves. Greed makes people sloppy." Riley had been 11 when her father's career imploded, not because he was corrupt, but because he refused to be. The police department kickback scandal had tentacles reaching into the mayor's office, the city council, even the local newspaper. When David Morrison started pulling those threads, the system fought back. Anonymous tips about evidence tampering, whispered allegations about prosecutorial misconduct, a carefully orchestrated campaign that painted him as unstable, overzealous. The worst part wasn't losing his job. It was watching her mother pack her bags 6 months later. "I can't do this anymore, Riley. I'm not strong like you and your father." That was 4 years ago. Riley had grown up fast since then, learning to navigate the whispers that followed her through the halls of Lincoln High. Most of her former friends had drifted away, either because their parents disapproved or because being associated with the Morrison name had become social suicide, which was why at 17, Riley Morrison had exactly 3 friends, a 4.0 GPA, and an acceptance letter to Northwestern's journalism program that she kept hidden in her desk drawer. She'd learned to be invisible, to observe without being noticed, to listen without seeming to care. Skills that had served her well as editor of the Lincoln High Herald, the school newspaper that most people ignored until last Tuesday. Riley pulled out her laptop and opened the spreadsheet she'd been building for the past 3 weeks. Column A, player names. Column B, grade point averages from the previous semester. Column C, current semester GPA. Column D, game statistics. Column E, college recruitment status. The pattern was impossible to ignore once you knew how to look. Marcus Williams, starting defensive captain, had failed chemistry, algebra, and English literature in the spring. His GPA had dropped to 1.8, making him ineligible for football. Yet somehow over the summer, those failing grades had transformed into C+s. Jake Thompson, the quarterback who'd led Lincoln to the state semifinals last year, told anyone who'd listen that he was too busy preparing for the NFL to worry about schoolwork. Yet his transcript showed perfect attendance and a 3.2 GPA. Tyler Brooks, the 6 feet 5 inches offensive lineman who'd verbally committed to Penn State, had missed 47 days of school the previous year due to what his mother claimed were chronic migraines. His medical absences had somehow been retroactively approved, but that was just the surface. The real story was in the money. Riley had learned financial investigation techniques by watching her father build cases, shell companies, wire transfers, unusual cash deposits. So Riley had filed Freedom of Information Act requests with the county clerk's office, requesting public records for school district financial transactions. What she'd found was a conspiracy that went far beyond simple grade fixing. Coach Roberto Martinez had been making regular cash deposits of $2,000 to $3,000 every few weeks for the past 18 months. His official salary was $58,000 per year, but his lifestyle suggested significantly more income. Principal Janet Stevens had opened 3 new savings accounts in the past year with initial deposits that precisely matched the dates of major high school football betting lines. Her son's medical bills for leukemia treatment had been mysteriously paid in full by an anonymous donor right around the time that Lincoln High's point spreads had become unusually predictable. The athletic department's budget showed payments to a company called Midwest Athletic Consulting that didn't seem to exist anywhere except on paper. The address listed was a post office box in Columbus, registered to a man named Vincent Torino, who'd been arrested twice for bookmaking in Pennsylvania. Riley's spreadsheet now had 17 columns and over 200 rows of data. The pattern was undeniable. Lincoln High School's football program was the center of an organized sports betting ring. Lincoln, Ohio was a town of 12,000 people where the biggest employer was a meat-packing plant that had laid off 300 workers in the past 2 years. High school football wasn't just entertainment. It was hope. Questioning the program wasn't just investigative journalism. It was attacking the very thing that made Lincoln special, but understanding didn't make it right. The more Riley learned about sports betting law, the more serious the implications became. Point shaving, deliberately controlling the margin of victory to influence gambling outcomes, was a federal crime. When it involved minors, when it crossed state lines, when it included racketeering elements, it became a RICO case that would bring FBI attention. Riley knew she should take her evidence to the authorities. But she also remembered what had happened to her father when he tried to expose corruption from the inside. She needed more. She needed proof that was so overwhelming, so publicly documented, that it couldn't be buried. "Be careful, sweetheart," he'd warned her just yesterday. "When you threaten something this big, people get desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things." Riley had nodded, but she wasn't sure she'd really understood what he meant until she walked into Lincoln High on Monday morning and felt the subtle shift in atmosphere. Jake Thompson made eye contact across the cafeteria. Coach Martinez slowed down to read her locker combination. Principal Stevens stopped her in the hallway. "I hope you're not working on anything that might reflect poorly on our athletic programs, Riley. It would be such a shame if misunderstandings created problems for students who've worked so hard for their futures." Friday afternoon, while reviewing game footage for the third time, Riley had noticed something. Coach Martinez talking on his phone during halftime. She'd enhanced the audio using software from her digital journalism elective. "I told you we can control the spread. Kid understands what's at stake. His family needs this to work as much as we do." The timestamp matched perfectly with the moment that Lincoln High, leading by 21 points, had somehow allowed their opponents to score 2 touchdowns in the final quarter, winning by exactly 6 points instead of the predicted 14. Jake Thompson had thrown 2 interceptions in the final 8 minutes. But Riley had watched the footage frame by frame. Those weren't mistakes. They were carefully executed plays designed to look like accidents. The confrontation was inevitable. Tuesday morning, journalism class, third period. Mrs. Hendricks was reviewing layout options when Jake Thompson walked into the classroom. "Need to talk to Riley," he announced. "It's about a story she's working on. Something that affects the whole team." Riley felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Jake. I'm working on several articles. The one about academic integrity and athletics," he said, moving closer. "See, I heard you've been asking a lot of questions, looking at records that maybe aren't any of your business." Marcus Williams and Tyler Brooks had appeared in the doorway, blocking her exit. "All my sources are on the record," Riley said carefully. "Everything I'm researching is either public information or voluntarily provided." Jake laughed. "That's cute. Your daddy teach you that phrase?" "My sources stand by their statements. There won't be any report, because you're going to delete whatever files you've got. Stop asking questions and find something else to write about." "I don't respond well to intimidation," Riley said. "And I don't delete research based on threats." Jake's expression darkened. "My mom works 60 hours a week to keep our family together. My little sister needs surgery next year that insurance won't cover. Tyler's family is about to lose their farm. Marcus's dad got laid off from the plant. I understand the stakes, Riley said quietly. But that doesn't change what's happening. You think you're some kind of detective because your father used to be important. Everyone knows what happened to your dad. He went crazy, started seeing corruption everywhere, ruined good people's careers. And now you think you're going to do the same thing. Jake Thompson had been coached on exactly what to say, exactly which emotional buttons to push. My father built cases based on evidence, Riley said carefully. Everything he investigated was documented, verified, and ultimately proven correct. The fact that powerful people destroyed his career doesn't invalidate his work. Jake stepped closer. Marcus and Tyler had moved into the classroom now. Your father was obsessed, just like you're getting obsessed. And we all know how that story ended. Maybe it's time to learn from his mistakes. Riley closed her laptop and looked directly at Jake Thompson. Get away from my desk and get out of my classroom. Or what? Or I'll publish everything I have found so far, send copies to the FBI's sports betting task force, and let federal investigators decide whether my research is worth their attention. The silence was complete. Jake's face went through several expressions. You don't have anything, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Riley reached into her backpack and pulled out a manila folder. Financial records showing unusual cash deposits. Game footage analyzed for statistical anomalies. Betting line data cross-referenced with player performance. Grade changes that violate district policy. Shell company registrations linked to known bookmaking operations. I've also documented this entire conversation, Riley continued, revealing her phone with an active recording app, including the threats and the admission that you're worried about federal attention. Jake's hand moved toward her phone, and Riley knew the next few seconds would determine everything. Riley had exactly 2 seconds to make a decision. For years of martial arts classes kicked in as she pivoted away from Jake's reach. The phone clattered across the desk, still recording. Give me that phone, he snarled. Mr. Thompson. Mrs. Hendricks finally found her voice. Riley grabbed her laptop bag as a shield. Marcus and Tyler were blocking the doorway completely. This is insane, Riley said. You're making this worse. We're protecting our futures, Jake replied. You have no idea what you're messing with. Jake fainted left, then grabbed for Riley's wrist. She twisted away, but Tyler had cut off her escape route. The 3 athletes hesitated, perhaps realizing that physically restraining a classmate crossed a line they couldn't uncross. The classroom door burst open, and Principal Stevens walked in with 2 men Riley didn't recognize. One wore an expensive suit. The other had the unmistakable bearing of law enforcement. What's going on here? Principal Stevens demanded. We were just talking to Riley about shutting down her investigation before it causes problems for important people. The man in the suit interrupted. Isn't that right, Mr. Thompson? Riley felt her blood turn to ice water. This wasn't a rescue. Agent Wells, FBI, the second man said, flashing his badge. And you must be Riley Morrison. Miss Morrison, we've been monitoring communications related to your investigation. We need to talk. You've been watching me? She asked. We've been watching everyone, Agent Wells replied, including these gentlemen who were just threatening you. Mr. Thompson, Mr. Williams, Mr. Brooks, you're all under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, racketeering, and now assault and intimidation of a witness. The man in the suit stepped forward. Vincent Torino. And before you ask, yes, I'm the Vincent Torino whose company has been paying coaches and administrators to fix games. I'm also a cooperating witness in a federal investigation that your research helped trigger, Miss Morrison. I don't understand, Riley managed. Your FOIA requests flagged unusual financial patterns that matched intelligence we'd been developing about interstate gambling operations. When you started asking questions about Midwest Athletic Consulting, it triggered alerts in our organized crime database. Principal Stevens was backing toward the door. Principal Stevens, please don't leave. We have questions about the medical bill payments and the grade manipulation software installed on your personal computer. I never meant for it to go this far, Stevens whispered. My son needed treatment. I just signed a few forms, changed a few grades. You never thought the IRS would notice $40,000 in anonymous payments? Agent Wells asked. How long have you known about the betting ring? Riley asked. 6 months. About your investigation? 3 weeks. We've been watching to see how deep the corruption goes. Jake's composure finally cracked. Violence? I barely touched her. Actually, Riley said quietly, reaching for her phone. You did more than that. She played back the audio. Jake's voice filled the classroom. Your father was obsessed. Maybe it's time to learn from his mistakes instead of repeating them. Then came the sounds of the physical confrontation. But the most damaging part was yet to come. You don't understand, his recorded voice continued. This goes all the way to the county commissioners, sheriff's department, school board, half the businesses in town. If this comes out, it doesn't just hurt us, it destroys everyone. Miss Morrison, Agent Wells said, we're going to need you to testify before a federal grand jury. Are you prepared for that? Riley thought about her father sitting in his empty office at night, surrounded by case files for a career he'd lost by choosing justice over comfort. Yes, she said. I'm prepared. The next 6 months transformed Lincoln, Ohio into the center of a federal racketeering case that made national news. The FBI raids began the following Tuesday. By Thursday, 12 people had been arrested on charges ranging from wire fraud to racketeering to tax evasion. The investigation revealed a network that extended far beyond high school football. County commissioners had approved zoning changes that benefited gambling operations. The sheriff's department had ignored reports about suspicious betting activity. Jake Thompson, facing 20 years in federal prison, agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. Riley testified for 3 days in federal court, presenting evidence that helped convict 15 defendants. The personal cost was exactly what her father had predicted. Death threats arrived through social media. Vandals spray-painted, "Snitch" on their house. Riley's part-time job at Walmart ended. Most painful was the community reaction at Jake Thompson's sentencing hearing. Over 100 people filled the courthouse to support him. Outside, protesters held signs reading, "Justice for Jake," and "Riley Morrison, Town Destroyer." Riley sat in the front row with her father, watching Jake stand before the federal judge. I know what I did was wrong, Jake told the court. I let my fear about my family's future make me do things that hurt other people. He turned to look at Riley. I'm sorry. You were right to investigate. You were right to speak up. I hope someday I can be the kind of person who stands up for what's right. The judge sentenced Jake to 18 months in federal prison, followed by community service. Coach Martinez received 8 years. Principal Stevens got 5. Riley graduated as valedictorian, her Northwestern journalism scholarship intact. But instead of celebrating, she spent graduation night working on her laptop, creating something new, the Student Press Legal Defense Fund, a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting investigative journalism in high schools and colleges. You're sure about this? Her father asked. You could have a normal college experience. You don't have to keep fighting other people's battles. I'm not fighting other people's battles, Dad. I'm fighting the same battle you've been fighting your whole career. The battle for truth, for accountability, for the idea that no one should be above the law just because they're popular or powerful. She saved the document and turned her laptop toward him. Besides, Someone has to show kids that speaking up is worth it, even when it's scary, even when it costs you everything. David Morrison smiled at his daughter. Your mother always said you were too much like me for your own good. Maybe, Riley replied, but I'd rather be like you than like the people who stayed quiet while kids were being exploited. 6 months later, Riley Morrison stood before a Senate subcommittee investigating corruption in youth sports. She was 18 years old, a freshman at Northwestern studying journalism and pre-law, and the youngest person ever to receive the National Press Foundation's Award for Investigative Excellence. The Lincoln High School case had led to reform legislation in 12 states. The Student Press Legal Defense Fund had handled 43 cases in its first year, helping student journalists from Alaska to Florida expose corruption in their communities. During her Senate testimony, a reporter asked if she regretted exposing the corruption given the personal costs. Riley thought about Jake Thompson, who was serving his sentence and had written her a letter thanking her for forcing him to confront his choices before they destroyed his life completely. Regret is what you feel when you don't do the right thing, she answered. When you stay quiet while people are being hurt. When you protect systems instead of people. I don't regret anything about exposing the truth. I only regret that it took so long for adults to listen. Riley Morrison had learned that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room really is the one everyone thinks is powerless. But she'd also learned something more important. The most powerful person in the room is often the one who refuses to be silenced. 3 years later, Riley Morrison sat in a different office, this time as a junior at Northwestern, surrounded by journalism awards and acceptance letters from law schools. But the manila folders were still there, now organized in file cabinets that held cases from dozens of student journalists. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. Miss Morrison, this is Jake Thompson. Got out last week, starting community college in the fall. Wanted you to know I'm coaching youth football now, teaching kids that integrity matters more than winning. Thank you for not giving up on doing what was right, even when I tried to stop you. Riley stared at the message for a long moment. She typed back, proud of you for choosing a different path. Those kids are lucky to have a coach who understands that character is more important than championships. Her father appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee and the morning newspaper. The headline read, Student Journalist Exposes University Admission Scandal. Investigation leads to federal charges. Another one of your kids? He asked. Riley smiled. Sarah Chin at UCLA used the same financial analysis techniques we developed for Lincoln. David Morrison handed her the coffee. You realize you've created a movement, right? Kids who would have stayed quiet are now asking questions. That's not always going to make you popular. Since when do we worry about being popular? Riley asked, echoing the words he'd taught her years ago. Never, he replied. But I worry about you carrying this burden forever. Riley looked around the office at the case files representing hundreds of students who'd found their voices. They're not everyone else's battles, Dad. They're all the same battle. The battle for the idea that truth matters. That justice is possible. She raised her coffee cup. Besides, someone has to show them it's possible. David Morrison clinked his cup against hers. In that case, let's get back to work. Outside their window, Northwestern University buzzed with students heading to classes. And in offices and newsrooms and courthouses across the country, young people who'd been inspired by a 17-year-old girl from Lincoln, Ohio, were asking the kinds of questions that made powerful people uncomfortable. The battle for truth continued.